Well, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who have joined us so far, we've got a few more people joining us in the lobby, so I'll just do a very quick intro about what you're going to hear about today. So my name is Eckhoff, and I'm the head of maths here over at OICB, and we're really delighted to have you all here to hear about the mathematics department here at OICB, and also to kind of give you a sense of what it is that we're trying to do to enhance the education of your child, specifically in the realms of mathematics. My aim here is to be as concise as I possibly can, but there is a lot to tell you, so I will try my best to give you all the details without too many details. Without further ado, let's see what we've got going on in the maths department. So the first thing I should probably do is speak to you about our team, and then I'll get into what our general vision for the department is, what we decided to do back all the way back in August when we all joined for the first time, what our philosophy of teaching is generally, so that includes the structure of lessons, but more so like the specific elements of the pedagogy. Then we're going to go into the details of the curriculum that we're offering at the minute. And then the last thing I'll speak about is our enrichment opportunities, which is looking at a number of things in terms of activities that we're doing outside of lessons, but also ways to support students in navigating the transition from school into either university, work, etc. So we'll start with the maths team, which is probably the most important bit, because you need to know who's teaching your children. And so here comes the team. So first person on the team that I wanted to introduce you to was Dr. Fabrizio Brienza. Now, Fab, we call him. He is Fab. He's fabulous. He's an excellent mathematician. He's actually probably the strongest mathematician in the department. He's Italian by nature, which is brilliant because he brings that international community sense to the department. His background is, so he's done a Bachelor of Science degree, a Master of Science degree, and then followed by a PhD, all in Italy. And his PhD research was as it says there, research into commutative algebra. But I'm also told that Fab does a lot of work with universities in exploring the mathematics of quantum mechanics as well. So that's quite a chunk of mathematics that is very difficult to grapple with. And I know that a few of our students are very interested in pursuing a career in that sort of area. So it's really nice to have him there because he can support that. I'll get to myself later, but I share that passion for physics as well with Fabrizio. And his teaching background, as you can read there on the screen, he's had an interesting career, generally split between Italy and England. Last thing to say about Fabrizio, he's got a fabulous background in international education within the UK, working at Bellerby's College in Brighton, but also Harrow Online School, where he actually chaired the department there as well. So Fabrizio is a very, very good colleague to have on board. He's wonderful with the kids. His depth of knowledge is second to none, really. And so the kids have utilized that greatly, is particularly when we've been doing the maths competitions and things as well. And likewise, I've utilized him as well because his mathematical underpinning is so strong. So he's a great member of the team, but not the only member of the team. So we've got two others as well, in addition to Fabrizio and myself. So the next person is Ben. So Ben Kershaw. He's British and has lived in the Brighton area for several years now. But his educational background is that he actually studied archaeology at that university in Wales, which I'm not going to try to pronounce for you because I do not speak Welsh. But so Ben's got a really wide breadth of interest, both in applied mathematics, but also in history and how history informs what we're doing now. And that's quite an interesting skill set to have on the team. But as you can see there, he's also been a very experienced teacher, also in the international sector, particularly teaching A-level maths. But also he has done some work with college preparation in the universities, both in the UK, but also in the US. So that Ben's a great person to have on board. In fact, he's got one of the best senses of humor in the department as well. So that's also very good. The next person I wanted to introduce you to is Miss Juliet Mackenzie. So Juliet's also British, also lives in the kind of Brighton area nearby. Her educational background is She's got a first class BSc honors degree in astrophysics. So there's another opportunity for the kids to kind of hear from a mathematical expert, but also from the guys of the physics background. So there's actually 3 of us in the department that have a physics background. And her teaching background, she's similar in time for teaching as I am. She's been around for about 25 years and also has taught in the international sector for more than 10 years. I think it's 12 years if I'm not mistaken. And of course, again, her main specialty is A-level maths, but she can also obviously teach the GCSE as well as the Year 9 curriculum, which I'll discuss later. One of her really special sort of skills in the department specifically is her ability to kind of develop support measures that help students at both ends of the spectrum. So those that need extra support, who may be falling behind a bit, but also those students who are also very good. She's very good at facilitating opportunities for them to look at extension work or other types of things or activities. And we'll talk more about activities later, but that's Juliet. And then last but not least, of course, is myself as the head of mathematics here. So I'm American, actually, and I make a joke to the students the other day that they're unlucky that they get the 2 worst parts of me, really, which are the first one is I'm American, so I talk a lot. And then the second part is I'm an extrovert, so I talk a lot. So the kids, unfortunately, get to hear me talk a lot in lessons. I do my best to try to curb that as much as possible to get them working. But needless to say, I like to ask good questions and I like to pursue interesting thoughts in mathematics. So I get the kids to do that as well. And my educational background is I was at university in the United States in Moorhead, Minnesota, which is my home state, where I studied mathematics and physics. But since then, I've also done a number of other qualifications, but the most notable one there is it's called the International Coaching Federation, a level 5 diploma in coaching and mentoring. And yeah, so all of the other things that you can see there that I've been involved with over the last sort of 20 years in my career, specifically the last school that I was at before this one was I was the head of sixth form as well as the head of math. So I've got a background in preparing students for university, and most specifically, I was in charge of the Oxbridge process for all subjects, actually, not just maths, but we did do a number of mathematics entries as well. But in addition to that, I've also sent several students to the United States to study. Most notably, I had 4 students in 1 year get full academic scholarships to Wellesley College, the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, and MIT. So as you can see, within the department, we have quite a breadth of experience and knowledge, both in the mathematics teaching, but also the things that sit around that. And so as we go forward, I hope that gives you some idea of, and gives you some confidence that your children are in good hands. And so as we go through the rest of the presentation, the next thing I'd really like to speak about, which was an exciting prospect for us as a department, was to look at, what is our vision for the maths department, and what is our vision, not just for the kids, but also like us as teachers, and what is our role as we go forward into this new idea of a new school. And one thing I'll say before I go into the vision is that a place like this or a school like this is a very attractive prospect because it is very rare that we get the opportunity as teachers to start something brand new from scratch. It is daunting, it is hard work, but it is exciting as well. And so the people that you've got at the school generally are people that are attracted to that kind of idea and that kind of opportunity. And so when we sat down to think about our vision back in August as a team, we came up with the following diagram. And I think this really drives everything that we do as a department. Obviously, we still have the assessments and the data crunching that we do, but ultimately the teaching and learning is centered around this. So the first thing is, our fundamental idea really is to foster the curiosity of the students. And so we're going to do this mainly through encouragement and the belief that they can do this. So many of the students come to us at various stages of their mathematical understanding. And our job is to actually take them where they are and take them where they want to go. So we're trying to meet the students where they are and then take them forward from there. So that's all about fostering their curiosity. But also sometimes we have to spark that curiosity by doing deliberate things. And so as much as possible, we try to link what we're learning to the real world. Specifically as well, there's a lot of interesting opportunities around the Brighton and East Sussex area where we are that we can tap into and actually broaden the field. So the paramount thing here is that we foster curiosity of the students. And so following that, we kind of think about, well, how can we do that? And so the first thing that we talked about as a department was, well, okay, curiosity is oftentimes tapped into once you've inspired someone to look at something. So a lot of times in my lessons and the lessons of the department, what we're trying to do is really by in two ways, inspire the students, both like making maths interesting, make it accessible, but also showing our own enthusiasm for what we're trying to teach is the way that we're going to do that. And once we've done that, once we've capture the students, then I guess everything else kind of follows thereafter. So once we've got that inspirational part in, we then go to the next phase, which is like, okay, so now that we've gripped them, what do we do next? And the answer to that question is we create further opportunities to take that inspiration into different areas. And so when we say create opportunities, that's multiple types of learning opportunities, both in the lesson and outside the lesson. And so one of the ways that I do that specifically is I will oftentimes give questions that are linked to a topic that are actually from outside, like in an industrial or in industry, to see if we can tackle that together. There's been a couple times where we've shown videos of how things apply, but also we are making connections with local universities and looking at opportunities to take the kids outside of campus here at OICB to see what else is going on. And we're very lucky that actually we have like 3 universities within, 5-10 minute drive from here. So the first thing we're going to be doing in the next few weeks is going to the University of Sussex to take a look at some of the lectures that they've got running there for the kids. So creating opportunities, this is what we mean. When we've created the opportunities, following the fact that we've inspired the students to get involved, the next thing is to go, right, well, look, now that you're in, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to just immediately thrive, because that's just not how it works, right? So as the topics get more tricky or they get more complicated or difficult, we then work with them to develop this idea of resilience, which is just not giving up on their learning. And we expect, and I know that Dr. Gemma shared this idea last week in the webinar, or 2 weeks ago, whenever that was, that we do expect the results to kind of be a roller coaster. We don't expect all students to be excellent all of the time. But what we're trying to do is say, well, okay, so when we have a bad result, or when we're not sure of what to do next, what behaviors exist then for us to then go forward so that we don't get stuck? And we're going to speak to the students about that, both in our lessons, but also as strategy tutors as well. So the idea of developing resilience so that when they're facing these really challenging questions or really challenging problems, we've got a set of behaviors ready to go that help them navigate that quickly. And if not quickly, then just perseverance as well. And then, of course, once we've got that kind of mixture of inspiration, the opportunities created, the kids are kind of persevering with their subject, then they can achieve the best possible outcome. And so that's the journey we're on with them. Because ultimately, what we want is for the students to achieve what they're capable of. What I'm not interested in is every single person getting an A star, because we know that that's just not going to happen. But what I'd rather do, and this is the coaching and mentoring background that I come from, I need to take someone where they are and meet them there so that they can navigate what happens next. And if all of those other 3 things come into line, then we can then achieve the best possible outcome. And so that's the vision of the maths department. So I hope that makes a lot of sense. Now, obviously, I'm sure many of you will have questions about that, but please just pop your questions into the chat and then we'll address them as we go. Okay, so that's the sort of vision, and that's the journey that we're trying to create day in and day out. So what happens then in terms of the day-to-day teaching, or like how do we structure our lessons and what is the philosophy behind that? And so the next slide will show a diagram as well. We'll take you on a little bit of a journey again. I love a diagram because then I can speak to it. So the next slide will have our sort of mastery approach, which is completely student-centered. And so what we see here is that it will be a cycle, and we have to start somewhere in that cycle. So when we meet the students for the first time with an idea, what we're trying to do first is create representation and structure to that idea. So oftentimes what that means is, if I'm taking a look at something algebraic, what I never do is just focus on the algebra. What we do is actually look at how the algebra links to the graphical picture, because the big picture informs the very intricate parts of the algebra. And so that's what we try to do. Now, with that as well, the picture then allows us to sort of access more knowledge than just letters and numbers next to each other. We can see what's going on and the patterns that are forming. And we can begin to then connect what we see graphically with what we see algebraically. Now, sometimes that's really easy and straightforward, and sometimes it's not. And it depends on the situation. But we have to start there, because then we can move into the next section, which is like, okay, so now how do we think about this mathematically? This is where the coaching comes back in now. So once we've had the picture and maybe the component, we can then take ourselves into like, all right, I know what I know from what I can see. What also might I think about that isn't necessarily obvious, right? And so that's when the chains of reasoning and then assumption making and making connections comes back into play again. So we then start to ask a little bit more tricky question about the topic. We explore that together rather than just individually. So what this is not is I explain something and then chuck about 50 questions at the students and expect that they do all of them correctly, and then we mark them. What we do is we actually present the picture, we ask some questions, and see what chains of reasoning we can uncover together as a group, right? So that's the kind of standard model that we're going with. And then, of course, that takes us into, okay, well, we then identify that we need some fluency, some skills to be able to take the idea that the big picture and the thinking and the assumption making we've done, we now need to actually build the skills to be able to then take that further if necessary. And most of the time it's necessary. So that includes then, all right, so what else can we draw upon? So our algebraic skills, our number facts if we're calculating, and then again, going back and seeing what other connections can we make. And what you'll see in each part of this thinking, making connections is always there, because at every stage we need to take a step back and look and say, well, what other things can we connect to this idea? What haven't we thought of, say? Or maybe what haven't we noticed before that we now notice, and make that very explicit. And then, of course, the last bit is to go, okay, so once we've understood the structure, we've unpicked the mathematical thinking, and then we've developed some fluency and some practice with some predictable kind of questions. Well, then what we do is we throw questions at them that they're not used to. So things what we say here is it's like a curveball. So how can we apply our knowledge to then a situation that's unfamiliar to us? And so there we go. We then say, okay, well, here's a question that is very different to the ones we've looked at, or here's a structure that's similar to this one but different. What procedures can we do? What conceptual ideas can we apply? And what other connections can we make to then make this work? And then, of course, we're not done there, because actually sometimes when we get to the variation stage, we have to go right back to the representation, because if we get something that's completely different looking, that can throw us a bit. So then our resilience drops. Well, then if we go back to the representation and structure, we can then connect the unfamiliar to the familiar, which then increases our confidence, which then increases our resilience. Then we can move forward again, and we just keep going through this cycle. And so that's the way that we're trying to structure the learning generally. And it may be that sometimes we go through all 4 of these in one lesson. Oftentimes we'll go through the first 3, and then in the follow-up lessons, we'll then look at the variation and stuff as we go back through that cycle. So I hope that makes as much sense as I possibly can without giving you specific examples. And the other option would be I could give you all some questions to solve, but I don't think any of you want to be put on the spot. And I say that because the last thing, of course, we do is we try to add our personalities to the conversation, which helps with the motivation behind the students. So using humor and human connection is the way that we do that. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense and that you're very happy with that, because the next thing I'm going to talk about is the structure of the curriculum that we do here at OICB for the different year groups. And so for year 9, we'll kick off with that first. We use a curriculum called Checkpoints. It's with the Cambridge Exam Board, and it's the lower secondary mathematics Checkpoints curriculum. And there's several reasons why we decided to go with this, which I'll try to highlight here as succinctly as I can. The good thing about using Cambridge is that it's worldwide. It's well known across many countries. And so it meets in many, not all, but many international standards for the curriculum at this particular age. And it's also a very good springboard into the GCSE, which follows then straight after, because that's also the curriculum we follow at GCSE. It gives a broad coverage of the topics. So that's number, algebra, geometry, and statistics as well. And so we get that in year 9, we get that again in GCSE, and probably less so at A level. But it's a broad coverage which gets the kids to learn several skills and amalgamate them all together and make connections. With progression, there's an obvious progression as the course continues. So it builds on itself as we go. There's actually 3 versions of the course. There's a year 7, a year 8, and a year 9. And the year 9 basically captures all of the previous 2 years in 1 year, and it builds into a deeper understanding of that. So the progression is very, very straightforward, and it's predictable, and it's easy to follow for the kids, which is helpful. There's rigorous testing and checkpoint tests. So obviously we have our internal testing, which is the skits. So the students will do those. And the skits that we create are based on the questions that we got from the past checkpoints exams. But also at the end of the course, which is in April, we will test the kids externally, and they will get an external certificate for this curriculum that they can then take elsewhere if they stay with us. Obviously they'll stay with us, but if they end up going somewhere else, then that is a certificate they can have in hand with the new institution. Obviously, I've said this, it prepares them for the Cambridge IGCSE. We've mentioned that it has global recognition, but ultimately for me, as a teacher, I judge a curriculum based on the flexibility within the curriculum. Because again, as we are a student-centered school, and the methods that we use for teaching are student-centered, what we don't want to do is be rigid in that we wouldn't be able to come back to things if necessary, or teach something in a different order, just because actually it fits the needs of the students that we have in front of us. So that's one of the reasons why I like this curriculum as well. And then in year 10 and 11, obviously we're doing the IGCSE mathematics course. And more specifically, you'll see there on that little textbook that's in the image, there's a core and an extended version of IGCSE. At OICB, we only do the extended course, but we will run that either as a 1-year curriculum, that's for year 11, those just entering into year 11, or we can run it as a 2-year course as well. And then parallel to that is the IGCSE additional mathematics course, which is with the same exam board. And so at the moment with year 11, we've got sort of 2 groups that exist. Well, there's actually 3, but there's sort of 2 genuine groups. One group of students is just doing the IGCSE mathematics course. And then there's another cohort of students that are doing the GCSE mathematics as well as the additional mathematics course. And so the teaching of the additional maths course looks like this. We teach all of the topics in the first half term from the maths course, and then the rest of the year we carry on with the additional maths course. Now, the good thing about that is that actually all of the topics that are in the additional maths course also appear in the maths course. They just go into a much greater depth. So there is still consolidation of the other material. It's not that we just leave it alone. We actually do cover it in the additional maths course. But also, in addition to that, the kids that are doing additional maths will have more subject access time, meaning they'll have, I believe it's 7 lessons per week if you're doing additional maths, whereas with the GCSE, it's a bit less than that. So they get more time in front of the teachers if they're doing the additional maths course to then cover the content. And we make sure that we constantly go back and revise some of the topics from the GCSE course. And I hope that makes sense. Going on to the A level then, it's a little bit tricky to understand the further maths elements. So I'm going to talk about the A level maths first. So if you're doing A level maths at OICB, we follow the Edexcel course. And when you're doing this qualification, there's 3 elements to it that you are compulsory. There's no choosing here. So all of the students will have to do the pure maths course. And when they come to exam time, that will be 2 papers that are 2 hours each, and it represents 2/3 of the qualification in total. At A level, you're also allowed to do what's called an AS, and that can be taken at the end of year 12. But if you carry on to the full A level, the AS material is also examined in the second year as well. So if you do an AS, you effectively do the AS content twice. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but it's just worth noting because the students are a bit confused about that. I get that question a lot, so I thought I'd explain that to you as well. And then in addition to the pure, you also have statistics, and it is assessed at the same time as the mechanics. They come together in one single paper. So as the paper is a 2-hour paper, one of those hours is specifically for statistics, and then the second hour is effectively for the mechanics. Now, for those of you who don't know what mechanics is, it's basically physics. It's Newton's second law of motion, a deep dive into that in various situations, as well as a few other concepts from physics. And that's quite nice, actually, because in my further maths group at the moment, we have students that are doing maths and further maths and physics. And so a lot of the content that they're seeing in physics is then being retaught in the maths lessons as well. So that's really good. So they get to hear things more than once. So that's the A-level maths course, and that's rigid. There's no selection there. Everyone is compulsory having to do this. Now, the further maths course, that's a little bit trickier to kind of nail down. So I'll take you through this as quickly but as clearly as I can. The compulsory modules are the Core Pure 1, which is in year 12, and then Core Pure 2, which will then be in year 13. And there's 2 papers there that will cover that content, and each paper is 90 minutes, and that represents 25% of the qualification. So those 2, you don't have a choice. They have to do that paper, or those 2 papers and those 2 modules. Then moving forward, this is where the options come in. They then get to choose 2 of the modules that are listed there. So as you can see there, it's broken down into sort of 4 sections, which are further pure, and there's 2 further modules there, 1 and 2. Further mechanics, which is again split into 2 modules, 1 and 2, and there's slightly different topics there. And then for the statistics, and then in addition to that, further decision. And so what we're doing at the moment with the further mathematicians, because we've got 2 groups of them, there's about 36 students doing further maths at the minute. We're trying to decide which modules we're going to do. And at the moment, the module that's in the lead in the voting is further pure 1, and then in second is further statistics 1. And that's interesting to see because the statistics course has much more language in it than the mechanics course. So it's just interesting to see that the students have chosen that. But they may change their mind, but I'll update you all as and when that happens. And for those optional modules, again, each paper is 90 minutes, and each of the rest of the modules will represent 25% of the qualification. And you can mix and match modules. So you could do FP1 with FM1, you could do FP1 with FS1, and so on and so on. So there's lots of decisions to be made there by us, but that's fine. We'll get to grips with that, and we'll communicate what we decide based on the student interest, but also some of this as well is like, what do the teachers feel most confident in delivering? Keeping in mind that we can teach all of the modules. All of us have experience in each of those modules, but we just have to make a decision. So moving on then, and this is the last section. So hopefully I've been concise and clear, and hopefully I'll continue to do that. What are the enrichment options here at OICB? And so I've got it broken down like this. So at the most basic level, we've got Maths Club. Now, Maths Club is it happens during the curricular time at 4:30 on a Monday, and then also 4:30 on a Friday. Now, the Monday session is both to extend students beyond the curriculum, but also to support them in the curriculum that they're doing. So we give the option of either or. So and there's two teachers both in the Monday night and in the Friday night to help do both of those things. And at the moment, we've had I think attendance kind of is like a roller coaster. So as we get into skit time and people coming up to their skits, suddenly it's flooded. And then other times there may be one or two because maybe they don't have a math skit that weekend. But what's really good is that the top mathematicians that we have at the moment are regularly attending and enjoying the club. And in that club, we will do preparation for the UKMT math challenges, the American math challenges, and any other thing that we want to be looking at, really. This is also the time that we'll get external speakers to come in as well, which I'll discuss in just a minute. So yeah, we do a lot of maths preparation there, maths competition preparation, but that doesn't only happen in Maths Club. So we will also do some prep work for that in lessons. So many of the lessons that I teach, right, after we've gone through and developed the modeling and the various cycles that we get through, this is part of the variation. So sometimes I will put, 4 or 5 questions to them that are from these competition papers to see how they cope. Obviously, the questions that I give them are linked to the topic that we're learning at the time. And yeah, it's quite fun to watch the kids try to just go straight for that one rather than the other ones. So there's definitely a lot of ambition in the room at the moment. As we go into from the current year 12, as they transition from year 12 into year 13, a big part of their time is going to be spent on university applications. And we are very much ready to be supporting the students with Oxbridge entrance exam support. And in fact, we've actually already started that a bit because there are several different types of entrance exam that the students will have to do. So we've informed them about which ones they would have to do, but also guiding them to resources that we've compiled for them to look at independently, but also we're here to answer any questions for them. But in addition to that, one of the things that they're going to have to do is sit down and do an interview, and that's quite I suppose a nerve-wracking task. So being asked to do some really complicated mathematics on the spot is tricky. So we prepare them for that, and we build their resilience for that. So that's one of the things we'll do. Guest lectures. So this will take 2 forms, actually. One, we'll invite people to campus to give lectures. In fact, we're just about confirmed now that we're going to get someone in to speak to the students about machine learning specifically. And hopefully we'll get a date in the diary very soon on that. We're just waiting to hear back. But also we have links to the universities nearby, so we will take students to these lectures outside of OICB as well. So that's another opportunity for us. And then, of course, outside of those lectures, we'll also look at maths trips. Now, we've got a couple of really interesting things that are nearby to us. So there's an observatory at a place called Herstmonceux Castle. And there's a university there called Bodder University, which is based in Canada, that have like a mini campus there, and their physics department there is fantastic. So our plans are to do things like see the observatory and look at anything we can there. They've also got like a science museum there with different activities that the kids can do. But of course, we're not far from London, which has a plethora of opportunities for us to look at and explore. So we have some huge ambitions there to kind of get the kids out of the campus to see things in the real world, as they say. And so that's the kind of enrichment opportunities that exist at the moment. Now, clearly, that won't be all of them. It's just all of them for the moment because we have a small team. So as we grow and as we get more expertise in the room and on campus, then we'll expand that offering as time goes on. And at that stage, what I'd like to say is a massive thank you to joining us today to hear from me about the vision and the what maths is all about here at OICB. And of course, at this point, I'd welcome any questions you might have. And I think my colleague who's sitting off camera might have a few ready for me. So am I able to foresee when the first of the math trips will begin? Yes, so the ambition here is to run the first trip in the term after the Christmas break. So in the new year, we're aiming to try to get to Hurstman Sioux because the observatory there, the best time to go there is in January, because typically in January in the UK, it's very cold, but the skies are very clear. So we're trying to book that for about the second or third week of January. But that's our ambition at the minute, is to try to run the first trip then. We will obviously be running the second lot of trips. If we go to London, we're going to aim for just before Easter or just after, so that we're not clashing with the exam schedule, which usually starts about mid-May. And also, obviously, the students that are not sitting exams this year, we're going to be looking at different things there as well. Because one of the things that I'd like to be able to do with the students is do a lot of investigative work once our curriculum learning has finished. And we're lining up a lot of really good activities to do that. And so for the year 9 and 10 specifically, we're hoping to line up several opportunities in the summer term. So that would be after we get back from the April break, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answers your question. And of course, if anything comes up before then that we think, yeah, we can't miss that, then we'll do our best to do it quickly. So, and actually, I just remembered as well, the University of Sussex run regular lectures every 2 weeks, and they're not running one this week, but there's another one running next week on Monday, and then then 2 weeks on from then on the Monday, and I'm hoping to take our kids to at least one of those. They've had some trouble. They've been very popular, so they haven't been able to promise us that they can give us enough places for what we want, because when I put the email out to the students to gauge their interest about what they would want to do, we ended up having, we would have had about 70 students going to one of them. And I asked the university if this would be okay, and they said, well, actually, we're probably full already. So we didn't get to go to that one, unfortunately. But we're working hard to go to at least 2 before Christmas if we can, if not 1. So hopefully that makes sense, and it is good. What is the difference between AS and A level? It's as simple as this. AS exams examine the students up to a certain level, which is called the advanced subsidiary. And so that's not quite the full A level. So a full A level would be like level 3 qualification in the UK. And AS is still a level 3, but it's just a slight bit less than the full A level. So basically, the topics at AS are still proper mathematics topics, say, and this is across any other subject. But when you then jump from the AS to the A level, that's like going from year 12 to year 13. The depth of the content goes a little bit stronger. So for instance, like if you do an exam in the AS exams, you're not being tested across the whole A level. It's about half of the A level. And you're only able to get up to a grade A at AS. If you want an A star, you'd have to complete the full A level, which is then the full depth of the course. The number of teaching hours for an AS is 180 hours, whereas for the number of hours for a full A level would be 360 hours. And I hope that answers your question. If you need more clarity on that, just let me know. Do we have mocks for year 12 at all? And yes, we do. Yes. And with maths, it's always a little bit tricky because to give you, for instance, and I don't mean to make this any more complicated than it needs to be, but to give you, for instance, right now, the year 12 students who have who are sitting just maths, they will not have finished their AS content until about the end of March, or just after that, just into April. And so they won't sit a proper full mock until they finish that content. However, there's aspects of the course that they have sat which they can sit a mock in. So the pure course, they will sit a mock in that for sure in March. And then we would hope to do another mock again thereafter. With the further mathematicians, we're giving them a proper mock exam for their AS content in the maths content, actually coming up in the next couple of weeks. So yes, we do have to do that. So we will be doing mocks. In fact, we'll do more than one mock. We'll probably do 2 to 3. 2 of those will be formal, run by the whole school. But as a department, we'll actually run another one as well, because that tends to be what students want to do. So that's how it's going to work. So yes, hopefully that makes sense. Do students taking both maths and additional maths GCSE will have 2 GCSE qualifications and certificates at the end? And the answer to that question is yes, they will. They're 2 separate courses, and so they will get 2 separate GCSE results for that. Yes, that's absolutely correct. How do you know if my kid is suitable for general math or further math? We have to monitor them carefully. It's not a straightforward question, actually. You'd think, in maths, you just look at the data and it tells you. But actually, if I give myself as an example, if you had to make a decision about me when I was 15 years old, that I would be a good mathematician, you'd probably say no. But then I matured, my brain got developed a bit, and when I was 16, 17 years old, suddenly it just clicked and I was flying, and then I wanted to do a degree in it. So it's kind of a very fast shift. But what we're doing, we're assessing the students regularly, we're monitoring them in lessons, we're talking about them regularly to see if we think they're going to cope. I would never make a decision about removing a student from additional maths if I didn't run that past the student first, but also then the parents second. So the decision isn't just mine, it isn't just the teachers, it's a collective decision between myself, the teachers, the student, and the parent, and or guardian if that's what's preferred. But yeah, ultimately, it's a marrying up as well of like, what ambitions do the children have? Because if a child has an ambition to get A stars across the board, but their data is suggesting that they're going to probably get like a C or a D, it's then a decision, well, are you okay with the C or D? Or would you rather not do that extra qualification so that you keep the profile of your results the way that you want them? And so it's never a straightforward answer, but it's never a conversation that is run by one person. So it'll be a dialogue. So there's not a black and white rule for that. But generally speaking, if someone's very much struggling, I would suggest that they would consider not doing that, if that makes sense. We also have baseline data that we did with the kids. At the beginning of the year, we sat them down to get an idea of what they already know. And if there was someone that was trying to do additional maths that had very little background in any of the content, being that the pace that we have to go at is quite quick, particularly in year 11, then hard decisions may need to be made. But so far, so good. We haven't had to do that yet. Do you suggest capable mathematicians start to teach themselves A2 maths during AS year? I would always suggest that, because if you're curious, and we come back to that diagram, if you're curious about something and you have covered the content of a course that you're doing, don't let the content of the course be the barrier to moving on. What I would always say, and I had a student that ended up completing A levels with 6 A levels one year, but 2 of them he did completely independently, and that was just driven by him. My job in that role, in that relationship, was to facilitate his ability to then do that. So when he came to me, he said, "Look, I'm done with this, done with that. What should I do next?" I said, "Well, what do you want to do next? Here's some suggestions. Here's a book on this, a book on that. Here's the next course that we were going to do. Feel free to get going." Because ultimately, what that will do is, the more autonomous the learner is, the more likely they are to ask really good questions as well. So they're going to get stuck at some point, and they're going to need an expert to come in and help them along. But if they're not taking, I say, the metaphorical bull by the horns to go down that road, then it's really difficult to then push them onto something new. So yes, I would absolutely say, like, if the AS content is completed in you've mastered it, then by all means, don't let us stop you. Get on with it, and then come and see us when you need help. So yeah, absolutely, 100%, go for it. Don't let the teachers get in the way. What I'll say, I'll go back to the other question. So both the question I've just answered, but also the one previous to that. So how do I know if my kid is suitable for general math or for further maths? Part of that as well is like that natural curiosity. Are they always looking at maths as like a complete barrier or a complete problem, or they have a genuinely like negative attitude all the time towards it? Well, if you have a difficult relationship with something, you've got sort of 2 ways you can go. You can either reshape that relationship as much as possible within yourself, with the help of maybe somebody else, or accept that maybe the relationship isn't one that is going to help you thrive generally. And so that's another consideration that we're looking at as well, right? So the mentality and the attitude generally of the student, if they're hating it, is it worth doing it? Maybe, maybe not, you know, and again, that's why the wider conversation comes into play. And then this other thing about, should you start A2 content early? Yes, and how might the students then do that maybe, right? And so we have several platforms and various things that we have available to the students they can access whenever they want. So principally for A-level, that is UpLearn. And they've got that actually now for all of the sciences, the mathematics, as well as the economics. And very soon, they will have access to the psychology one as well. And what that platform allows them to do is to kind of work through any part of the course at their own pace when they need it. So if they've need extra support, there's that to be done. There's extra exam practice to be done on there, and they can access that whenever they want. But also there's some extension stuff as well as access to the rest of the course, which is the A2. So if they've done the AS stuff and they're very happy with that, and their scores are very strong, and they've shown mastery, then by all means move on and use that platform. And then of course the other thing is, all of us as teachers are putting several things up into teams for them to access extra content, extra resources, and obviously then moving them on to the next module or course. If that makes sense. Will we be sitting or getting students to sit AS exams externally, or will we just be testing them internally in the college? And the answer is a bit of both. And the detail of that will fully depend on specifically what the students are wanting to do, but also what's most appropriate. And so there's a couple of conversations here that sit behind the decision. On the whole, the vast majority of students across all subjects will do an AS exam at the end of this year. And the reason why we're doing that, and I think Dr. Gemma said this in her webinar as well, is because we want to be able to use an externally assessed grade to use as a predicted grade for their university applications. And that's the best way to do that, is to actually have them sit an actual exam in exam conditions and have it assessed by an external body rather than doing it internally solely. Having said that, the maths and further maths situation makes it a little bit more tricky for us to do that. And so, for instance, would be, you know, when we started the course this year, we were initially going to do the full A-level maths course and get them to do the full A-level exam course at the end of year 12. And we changed our mind on that because some universities don't like students sitting full A-level exams in different years across different subjects. So what we decided to do then is to teach all of the AS content in 1 year for both maths and further maths, and then do the A-level content in year 2. And the decision to do the AS exams will come down to this, really. If a student is thinking about dropping further maths in year 13, which is very possible, there's nothing wrong with that, then it would be a good idea for that person to definitely sit an AS exam in further maths, because then that gives them some UCAS points or university application points to use as they apply for university. Some of the A-level mathematicians that are doing maths and further maths, it wouldn't be in their best interest to sit several exams the first year, knowing full well that they're going to have to be reassessed on that same content the following year. So there will be some students in maths that will not do ASs, but those are the students that are doing both maths and further maths. The students that are just doing maths at the moment, right now, we do want them to sit AS exams. So if that changes, of course, we'll inform everyone about that. But ultimately, again, a decision about this is not straightforward necessarily all the time. And actually, in most cases, we'll have to take it on a case-by-case basis. Because, of course, the other consideration is, are we certain that the students will be ready for the AS exam? And if we're not certain about that, then yeah, we may elect to not enter that student for that exam. But it helps us to predict their final grade, which helps us then put together their university application. So hopefully that makes sense. Ultimately, our aim really, and I spoke to the kids about this as well during the first 2 weeks in August, what we're really trying to do well is to tap into their motivations in a very specific way. In particular, we're trying to keep them motivated through the belief in what they can do, rather than us simply rewarding people or simply, I guess, threatening people to do well. What we want the kids to do is to do well because they want to do well, and also they believe they can do well. So a lot of the structures that sit underneath the teaching and learning in our department are about creating that sense of feeling like I can do this, I believe I can do this, therefore I will do this, rather than I can't do this, I'm not going to do this unless I'm rewarded, etc. So now, keeping in mind, we still have the ability to reward, and we will reward when necessary, and when if students do well in competitions and stuff, we will absolutely reward that and celebrate that. But fundamentally, what we're trying to tap into is that sort of internal drive to want to learn more, and that comes from belief. So that's what we're trying to develop mainly. What I'd like to say one last time is a huge thank you to all of you for joining. Thank you for the excellent questions. Obviously, if you have further questions that you didn't think of at the time, you can always email them through to the team, and they'll forward them on to me, and I will respond in due course. All the best to you all. Have a great afternoon, and I will hope to see you, some of you on campus at some point. If you're wondering who I am, I'm the bald American guy making a lot of noise in the corner. Take care, everyone, and all the best.